It's Intermission with Annie again. Intermission Cocktails. My guest today is Thomas Schumacher, president and producer of Disney Theatricals, also the current chairman of the Broadway League.
Pity me.
Yeah, pity you. Yeah, I know your days are long and hard, and many of us in the field are just really glad it's you at the helm right now, because you're the one who's going to have to lead us out of it. So, yeah.
I felt that weight you put on my shoulders. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Did you see? I saw your shoulders just go down.
Oh my goodness!
I put all that weight on your shoulders. I'm going to lift my glass of red wine to you. This is Playhouse wine from
yes,
McLean.
I'm tickled. I have a bottle. I have both your Cabernet and the Chardonnay here. I haven't tried either one yet, so we're going to do this together, right?
Curtain Call Cabernet from McLean Cellars. Here we go.
Oh, that's lovely.
Isn't it?
It's gonna go, and I have a little cheese board next to me I put together. I have a rice cracker, and I have, I've just, I thought, well, I'm not going to sit here and drink wine. I don't normally drink during an interview anyway. It's against my policy. But I want to have fun with your operation today.
Thanks for taking one for the team. McLean Cellars has graciously crafted 2 wines for Laguna Playhouse exclusively. Our Curtain Call Red, which is the Cabernet Sauvignon, and a Ghost Light White, which is the Chardonnay. You may try that. What do you think?
Oh, that's lovely too.
Yep.
Oh, I'm very happy with. Where do I get this wine?
You get it on the Laguna Playhouse website. You go right to. You can either
good thing I asked that.
It's a very good thing you did. You go either to the section where it says Play at Home page and do Intermission with Annie cocktails, and there's a link there. There's also a link on our homepage, and you can buy it by the case. We'll deliver it to you.
And when I come to the theater, do I drink it? Do you have it in the theater?
We haven't gotten that far yet because the world turned upside down as this wine was just coming out.
Oh, because I would really love a sippy cup with this wine in it.
Wouldn't you?
The next time I'm at the Playhouse.
Yeah, the next time you're at the Playhouse, we'll do that. So the last time you were at the Playhouse, you and I did a friendly Q&A at our friends, the Laguna Art Museum.
That was a great night. I met so many fun people that night.
It was a really good night. And then you stayed and saw our production of The Seafarer.
Which was fun because not only is it a play that I love, but it also starred John Vickery, who was in the original cast 23 years ago of The Lion King. In fact, we were in 23 years ago right now, we were in Minneapolis with John Vickery from your production, from my production, rehearsing the very first company of The Lion King.
Wow.
Which seems like yesterday and a century ago.
Yeah, both. Yeah. And Vickery was your Scar, right?
He was Scar, yeah, the bad guy.
Yeah, he's got that voice. He's got that great.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful voice. I think I'd met him actually the first time I'd met him. We were doing something at a Mark Taper production at Sundays at the Itchy Foot.
Gosh.
And it wasn't Mandelstam's Witness. That was Kurtwood Smith, who also has one of those voices. But
yeah. Another great actor.
Oh, wonderful actor.
Yeah. He, both Kurtwood, well, I don't know about, Vickery was on stage at the Taper more than once. And Kurtwood, I think, was in Our Measure for Measure that Bob Egan directed with Kate Mulgrew. And
weirder than that, Kurtwood was a drama teacher at the local junior college, Kenyatta Junior College, outside of my hometown of San Mateo, California.
I know that college.
Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
Kurtwood was there way back then. He must have been, really like right out of school and took a job teaching drama at a community college that had a nice theater program.
And, television loves him. Television audiences love him. He's had such a great TV and film career as well. But I sure loved him on stage. Yeah. So
he has a real power.
I chose not to sit with you and watch Seafarer because I always feel like that's just too much pressure.
It is very hard to sit with people
yeah.
who are responsible for a show.
Yeah,
I actually had to sit. We have this giant musical. We did a stage version of Mary Poppins, and when Julie Andrews came to see it, I literally was designated as the Act One sit with Julie, Dame Julie, and which is extraordinary because I'd known her for a long time. But we literally walked into the Prince Edward Theatre in London on Old Compton, and the audience leapt to their feet, and we were in a box, house right, and so she stood and did the light bulb wave. But by the time the act ended, I was sweating through my tuxedo.
Exhausted.
And I told Sir Cameron McIntosh, my producing partner, I said, "You're taking Act Two with her."
And did he?
Yeah, he was too nervous to do Act One with her. But once she was broken in, he was okay. No, you know, it's so hard to sit with people who have expectations. And I can barely be in the theater. I pace. I sit the first couple of previews, and then I have to stand in the back.
Yeah,
and then I usually find my spot, often on a staircase where I can watch the show. But if you just sit night after night after night, particularly on my schedule is very different than yours, and what your Playhouse family understands is how many previews you do and how long your runs are. But I probably sometimes preview a show as long as you run it, right? So the previews are quite intense, and you're changing every night because it's new material. So you're rewriting, and it's very hard to watch the show top to bottom every night from a seat. And also because now in New York, people are now watching me watch the show, and that's a
thing. That is a real thing for people who don't know it. Yeah,
I mean, it's hard because and you better not nap in your own show.
Oh, brother. Yeah, we let Gordon all the napping for us back in the day. We didn't.
Dear Gordon Davidson, that man could fall asleep in a football stadium on a good game. He had an extraordinary ability to do that.
Play-by-play.
Yeah, and to still know what happened.
Sleep.
Yeah. I do nod off now, but mostly in foreign language productions all over the world. I am known to sleep through whole sections of a show in Japanese for the you've seen it for the 15th or 20th time in Japanese, which
Brazil. Well,
actually, the Portuguese is so pretty, and the language, but in Japanese, it's just jarring to try to follow the play because people don't realize this, but how much longer it is. It's almost 100% longer. So you have to condense what they're saying.
Oh.
And so it's interesting. German's about 50% longer than English. Oh yeah, the translation gets very tricky.
Wow.
Yeah, very, very tricky.
And Germany must be, you do a lot of shows in Germany.
Oh, we're big in Germany.
Yeah, you're very big in Germany.
I'm going to spend a lot of time in Germany in the next year once we start getting shows back on their feet again.
Yeah, so let's talk about getting shows back on their feet again, Mr. Chairman of the Broadway League. It's hard to know. The world changes every day. We just keep trying to come up with a variety of scenarios, and as the world changes, we just try to stay agile and plan as much as we can. But what are you thinking going down the road? What's this look like?
Well, life is what happens while you're making plans. But if you don't make plans, life won't happen. So I have these sort of two assignments. One is Disney Theatrical. I have, over the next 14 months, I need to get 28 productions of ours on their feet. That is 20 productions that closed, that need to reopen, and 8 productions that were what we call on the runway. Like I have 4 Frozens to open.
Right.
Immediately, Australia, London, Germany, Tokyo. Germany, we do Hamburg for that one. I've got to get those up. I have a new Lion King in Paris to open. I have a new production of Aida to open. So there's a lot of,
About.
which is a revival of ours. And so I have a lot to do there, but the whole of Broadway, which is part of the Broadway League, and the whole of Broadway touring, it has to get up in each case. So you're touring to, 50 states. Each one has its own rules about assembly and safety. And then Broadway itself needs a set of safety guidelines, which we have a sensational committee of the leading people in science, technology, and medicine who are helping us figure out how to keep the audience safe and how to keep the actors safe. So right now, it's pretty clear that we're not opening in this calendar year, and that shows will start to come back as we get into 2021. And I literally, right before I hopped on this with you, I was laying out all the producers of the shows that were running, things like Hamilton and Wicked and Lion King and what have you, and things that were about to open when we shut down, are all laying in to this calendar that I'm trying to manage of,
I mean, didn't Six was supposed to open that Thursday night that you shut down?
Yes, that Thursday, I think it was the 12th, and Six didn't open. So it's very hard. And there's shows that hadn't even begun previews yet. So it's a lot to coordinate, but it's a lot of things like how many people think they're using studio rehearsal space, because there's only so many rehearsal rooms in New York. And the priority has to go to the shows that had not been running. But even, a big show like Lion King, it'll take at least a week for Lion King Broadway of just the crew turning the machines back on, because they will have been turned off for a year, right? So getting, all the automation and everything running and the lamps, the lights, everything, that's a lot. And they'll have a week-ish to do that. And then you'll need a week.
Just cleaning your lighting inventory takes a week.
Oh yeah. And then the company needs rehearsal time, but the company will also need prep time for new protocols. How do we get into our makeup? How do we get into our costumes? How do we manage costume changes? How do we do wigs? How do we do microphones? All the protocols have to be taught. So we're all figuring that out now. It's a lot. And if you think about it all at once, it's daunting. If you just sort of try to manage it as a process, it's not so bad.
Yeah. And of course, what you learn going through all of this will translate to theaters all over America, certainly, and our protocols and all over the world.
But frankly, equally the other direction. So I believe, for example, we had to shift Frozen in Sydney, Australia from July to December. Tickets are on sale. We've transferred about 83% of the tickets just moved straight over, which is amazing, right? Even through this, people were happy to say, "Oh, I'll pick a date after when we open on December 10th or the preview period." We'll learn a lot on that before I do London, Hamburg, and Japan and Tokyo. We will learn a lot from touring shows. So the expectation is the American Road, Broadway, the longest street in America, which weaves across our country, bringing Broadway shows to, communities all across the 50 states. We'll learn a lot how that goes. And right now, we're still sorting these protocols out. So we had people guiding us, but now we sit down with all the members of organized labor, right? There's 14 unions on Broadway, and we all have to be comfortable. And the interesting thing about this is everyone wants the same thing. A safe space for actors, a safe space for the crew, a safe place for an orchestra if you have one. And how we manage that, that's complicated. But it's no different than many people watching this conversation right now who may own a retail store or may work in a store or may work or own a hotel, or how everybody is doing this. We're all going back to school, and it's exhausting and frustrating.
The restaurants, it's very interesting to see how different restaurants, the different approaches restaurants are taking with the same piece of information about how they open up.
Well, and also we're going to learn new information constantly while we're doing this. And that's the hard part, is we're going to make decisions by September, October that may not be as relevant based on the advances in science, technology, and medicine.
Right.
But you have to make a plan. And I've been big, and my colleagues that I work most closely with, we've all been saying we need a practical plan, and we can't wait for magic beans. As much as Jack loved his magic beans, we can't just wait for magic beans. We have to take out, we're theater people. So we have to make a plan. And then if magic beans turn up, yay. Right. But, and I'm rolling my dice because I really want some magic beans, but I also want to be able to, I want to be in the theater with people again and have everyone feel great.
All right, so you, because this is how you and I met, starting out our careers right out of college at the Mark Taper Forum. So you are deeply steeped in nonprofit, regional, resident theaters. Your roots run deep there. And clearly, you know, when you went to feature animation and ran feature animation for Disney, it took you in a different direction and continued to, but you still are at heart, deep down, somebody who was raised in the nonprofit theater, right?
Yeah, and I talk about it a lot. I teach at Columbia, and I talk about it there. This notion of institutional theater. Once we separate what distinguishes commercial theater from nonprofit theater, which is an economic structure, tax structure, and sometimes, usually, a different mission statement. But there are very few, if any, besides us, but a handful of institutional commercial theaters. So the way Disney Theatrical is set up, Disney Theatrical is 26 years old, is that it? Yeah, 26 years old. And we are an institutional theater, right? So we have arguably an artistic director, managing director, production department, marketing department, legal department, education department, HR department. There's a lot of people who run Disney Theatrical and run these shows around the world. And sometimes we partner, not very often, but sometimes we partner with other people, but which you would do at your theater, a co-pro or whatever. But it is a culture. And so, and everyone brings something to it. Many people, my two closest associates, the two brilliant people who really, really run Disney Theatrical, Ann Court and Andrew Flatt, who are, for me, you know, legendary. Each one of them began in entry-level positions at Disney Theatrical. Andrew was in the marketing department, and Ann arrived from Canada and was an assistant. And both of them rose very quickly. And literally, I don't make a decision. We run this thing as this trio, or this triumvirate who do it. And we have fantastic attorneys and you know, a real interesting mix of people. That's institutional thinking. And so we think institutionally, which is why right now this is particularly challenging, because we're not, this is the vulnerability of an institution. We're not fleet of foot.
Yeah.
So my closest colleagues who, you know, have a hit play or two, or one hit musical, a couple of versions of the world, they just contract. You know, their 12 people become, you know, say furlough some, and now they're down to 6, and they're going to hang tough together and get it back up again. But we're a bunch of people, and that makes it very hard to figure out what to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I always think of this like when you're out sailing on a small boat and there's a cargo ship coming your way, and you have to be mindful of the fact that it's going to take them 5 miles to just slow down. So you've got to be mindful of where you are in the midst of all of that, because you can just get run over.
Yeah, and I think something that I've never talked about publicly, but when you, one thing people do not realize about Disney Theatrical, and it's the way we set this business up long ago with Michael Eisner, is Disney Theatrical is not subsidized by the Walt Disney Company. Disney Theatrical originally, Disney Theatrical originally, when we opened Beauty and the Beast, and I'll talk about Beauty and the Beast in a minute because there's some fun things happening there, but when Beauty and the Beast opened, the company just threw some money at it, and we mounted a show. The company mounted a show. I didn't. I wasn't part of it. And once it was up and running on Broadway, in kind of a scrum came together to do that. The Michael Eisner, the then chairman of Disney, said, "What if we made a business out of this?" And that's when my virtual sibling and long-term business partner, Peter Schneider, and I began to work to really create an institutional producing organization, Disney Theatrical, which we were doing while we were also running different parts of the studio, mostly animation in California for Disney. Well, what happened is once we did Lion King, the unexpected hit, right? No one thought it'd be. I mean, now it's like the Statue of Liberty, you know. But at the time, it was such a high risk thing. But because once we started doing multiple productions of Lion King, it threw off enough money that we could develop a budget based on the profits of the Lion King. We could pay for all the other shows, create a development department, create a production department, and then return the profits to Disney. But we were using the money we were making to make everything. Right. And that, as opposed to a nice fire hose of cash coming from California. So when you're doing that and you become successful, and you know, the pillars of Disney Theatrical actually are like, the Lion King's a big one. And then the rest of our portfolio productions is the next leg. And the third leg is actually Disney on Ice, which people don't know is ours. That's produced by my dear friends at Feld Entertainment, a wholly owned family company. The Feld family, Kenneth Feld and his brilliant daughters run this company. And I'm, as you know, because we talk about it all the time, but I'm in Florida a lot in an ice rink watching rehearsals of shows, because we've had as many as 7 productions out at one time around the world. And that's a big thing. And that's the essence of Disney Theatrical. And well, with that success, then you start to expand and do things because people expect you to, right? If you're working in the arts and you are successful, you're expected to share and guide and do things and start programs. Well, now our reach is huge around the world, and we have to now look at it because it is completely imploded. And how will it come back? And what transformation will happen?
Yeah, so what does it look like elsewhere in the world where you are? And, you know, you and I have talked about what it's going to take just to get you to Australia, and what you have to do in order to get there to put that show, to put Frozen up there is, you know, kind of monumental.
It's monumental in terms of the team that will go down. It'll be a smaller team than usual, which will go down. And, you know, we're dealing with the information we have now, which is that we'll all have to go into quarantine. It's questionable how we'll actually get into the country, what kind of visas we'll need. And we'll work that out. We will follow the rules of the government. And the government in Australia has always been so supportive of theater. We'll be in New South Wales because we're in Sydney. Sensational people, sensational tourist boards. They're a country that really has their stuff together, and they have some pretty clear leadership on the health front. And so it's clear, you know, today what we would need, but I'm not going down until probably October, and we'll learn more by then. But trying to follow this, and there's just new restrictions that went in today in the EU about not allowing Americans. The day we're recording this, the EU has said they don't want Americans to come, and they're trying to figure that out. You know, I have a home in Europe that I have not seen and probably won't see till the end of the year because I can't get to it. It's just kind of weird.
Who knew when you left from Carnivale that was going to be it for a while?
It was crazy. This year, Carnivale, I arrived in Venice. I'd been in Venice in December, January, and February, preparing for a benefit that we were producing. And so I was working in Europe, so I kept popping down to Venice to get that ready. And when I arrived for the actual events on February 11th, we had our temperature taken, we got off the plane. And no one in America was even talking about this yet. But we got, you know, the zap on the forehead at passport. And 3 days after we left, a week later, they shut down Carnivale and shut down Venice. I mean, it just came so fast.
Yeah, you really kind of got out in the nick of time.
Yeah, or it would have been lovely to be trapped.
Well, I've thought about that too. Yeah.
You know, just have a bucket out the window and pull food up to the flat. That would be nice. I have fantasies of desert island existence. So doesn't everybody?
Yeah.
What would I do if, you know?
Yeah, I think we've actually had the conversation of if you could only eat 3 things on a desert island for the rest of your life, what would they be? Eat or drink 3 things.
Well, I would just hope there was a refrigerator. That's all, really.
There's just got to be some kind of, you know, it's got to be wine or vodka involved, you know.
Well, the great thing about wine, and I think about this actually often, you know, I have a very large cellar, and I often think that when you do that, when you take a sip of wine, you're sharing something communal with millennia. You know, people 2,000 years ago were drinking wine. We have amphora that held wine. We know they were drinking. I mean, good Lord, they had Bacchus, for pity's sake. And that's fascinating. You know, we were walking around Pompeii a couple of years ago and standing at restaurants. What is the vestige of a restaurant? Thinking about that people would go eat, they would go home, what was in living rooms, and it's devastated, right? The year 70, Vesuvius blows up and Pompeii is blown up and Herculaneum is covered in ash. Well, they were living a life pretty much like the one we're in right now. They might not have been speaking to each other, 3,000 miles away, but they had long-standing relationships like ours. They made theater. In Pompeii, there's a main stage theater and then a small experimental theater, the Black Box. They had conversation, they enjoyed beauty, they made art, they celebrated, they did a performance, they had music, they had, they were living like us. And we think somehow there's some big barrier there, but no, they were living like us and having the same conversations. In Hadrian's time in Rome, Hadrian's Wall, the great emperor of Rome, Hadrian's villa, which is on a hill outside of Rome, which is also just, you need a scholar to take you through it to really understand what you're looking at. But he said it was not a place for negotium, business. And negotium, or for people who speak Spanish, negocios, business, but that actually means negotium, means not leisure. And otium was the practice of life in Hadrian's villa, which is the active pursuit of leisure, language, conversation, food. And you didn't perform negotium, business, when you were in Hadrian's villa, which is during the summers. And don't you love to think about that, that they were actually managing their lives? And these are the same conversations we have. And you pick up your local paper and there's inevitably 4 times a year some article about how to de-stress your life. And our species has been talking about since our species got organized, how to de-stress your life, how to relax, how to go to a pub, the invention of restaurants, all these things that have happened so long ago. And in some cases, it developed, destroyed, reinvented. I think about that too. I think about, I'm working on this modern telling of Aida. I did it many years ago with Elton John and Tim Rice. It's a very popular musical. And Elton John and Tim Rice's Aida, and we're doing a revival of it. And in the investigation for the revival, because there's things in the original production that I wouldn't do today. We're 25 years on from when we created that. And there's things that don't sit right. There's things about gender, there's things about race, there's things about class that just feel funny to me. So we've dug back into it. And the woman I've asked to direct it was actually in the original production. She's a brilliant director named Shelley Williams. And we've been investigating, and she did a deep dive and learned so much about life in Nubia, which is the conflict, it's a love triangle between a Nubian princess, an Egyptian princess, and an Egyptian captain. And they're this interesting triangle. But what Shelley has discovered is so much about how their lives worked. And it's in many ways it's the same values we have. People wanting to protect themselves, their family, their friends, their children, love of country, loyalty to heart, loyalty to country. It's the same issues we're dealing with. And isn't that why when we look at Shakespeare today, when it's done right, that we see our own stories played out? We see topics that we know, but it is our own stories being played out. And I love that because it just means that we're connected.
Yeah, it's been interesting to think about when Shakespeare wrote his, some of his most substantial works were in the middle of a plague, and what might emerge after, the world pandemic. What, who knows what what people have been doing during this time. I mean, it's been a big adjustment for everybody, just for those of us in the theater who spend, you know, often 7 days a week in the theater, 7 nights a week in the theater, you know, working all the time. It's been an interesting adjustment to trying to have a kind of a different kind of balanced life. I mean, has it been good for you?
No. I'd like to make some romantic story out of it, but what is interesting is it's been lovely to be in my home. Yes. I have not been, I think there's been no period in my life in 3 decades when it's been this long between trips to the airport. My average is a flight a week. That's a typical year is a flight a week. Sometimes it's 4 flights in a week, and then I have 2 weeks with no travel, but it gets into that zone. And I have no intention to fly for July. I have no intention to fly for August or September. That's, that's interesting to be at home, to re-examine. It's very hard though and I'm sure many people who are watching this, if they're watching this historically, they won't relate to it, but if they're watching it contemporaneously, they will have many of the same things. I have a lot of trouble reading. I have 4 books going. I'm struggling to concentrate at the end of the day. I'm watching some old movies that I've either never seen or wanted to see at night, but even those I have trouble staying with, and I'm like, it's very and I think a lot of people are having the focus problem, right?
Really having trouble, very much so, with reading, which I thought that was something I'd just fall into, just to have the time to do a little more reading, and I can't concentrate on it. There's just too much that we're facing and grappling with to just be quiet.
I think it's hard enough for most people to read the darn sourdough recipe. There's so many steps.
Everybody's doing it. You did it. You guys did it.
Well, the house did it. Yeah, I
make your sourdough.
Yeah, I don't. No, I didn't do that. I've been. I do 1 or 2 meals a week, usually 1. I'm getting my hands around a real proper ragu. Yesterday, I cooked it for 10 hours. Yeah, wow. It was nice. Yeah.
Well,
yeah, none of this jar stuff.
Yeah, our beloved Michael Arden has really got the sourdough thing down, apparently.
Yes, Michael Arden, the extraordinary former actor, now director. You know, he has a theater piece this coming weekend.
So excited.
Here in the Hudson Valley, where we all will have our phones and headsets on. I think we're tuned into, I don't know what. He needs to, and then we drive our cars and we get instructions about where we're going to be.
Yeah.
And
immersive.
I think we have to.
And show, it's going to be thrilling.
I'm not actually an immersive theater fan. Well, I don't like to be touched by actors or called up on stage.
We did go through the living theater of the 70s, you and I didn't like it. And I don't like it now.
No, I'm paid to look at you,
Yeah. But it'll be interesting. I can't wait. Because I'm 3,000 miles away, I'm hooked up virtually to the experience. So
how will that be?
I don't know. Michael's going to give me instructions, but I supported his venture, and somehow I'm going to get some kind of a link, and I don't know if it's delayed or what, but
Yeah, well, you'll get instructions this week, because I think we turn up at the first venue on at 7:30.
Well, and
so
I
you'll
just
be in the
fascinating
experiencing it.
Things like, I said, how are you going to light things outdoors in the dark? He said cars with headlights, and then that emerged as something people started to do. But he's always one step ahead of the ideas.
Yeah, I'm one of his biggest fans. I'm a giant Michael Arden fan. But it's fun for me to, you get to this age, once you cross over 60, they can't take what you've done away from you. They can't, you've done it. You've seen a bunch of stuff. And because we get to watch people that we knew when they were very young become masters. I have friends who've written books. I have friends who've written movies. I have friends who I have a friend who is the showrunner and executive producer and creator of a television series on Disney Plus, and I knew him when he was in a Broadway show as a fish.
Wow.
For me, you know,
Wow.
and that's fun, right? You love that to see. That's Tim Federle, you know, who's a genius. And I knew that he would become somebody special. There's so many people that we get to see and transform, you know? And it's fun. You know, we have a mutual friend, the great director, Jack O'Brien. And it's fun for me because Jack O'Brien directed the first play I ever saw. And it was at ACT in San Francisco. The first professional play. It was a glorious production of You Can't Take It With You, which is maybe my favorite American play. And right up there with Our Town. I do like the classics, and I'm not interested in Eugene O'Neill. You can keep it forever. But it was a production. It was a production of You Can't Take It With You, based on a production that the great late director Ellis Rabb had done when Jack was his associate. Jack staged it at ACT. I saw it, I think, 1972, 73. And I mentioned it in the opening remarks to, in the opening segment of a TED Talk I did. And so in prepping for the TED Talk, I mentioned this production that had changed my life. And so, you know, it's a TED Talk, you're supposed to pay attention. So I researched the play and I went and said, who actually directed that? And I went, oh my God, Jack O'Brien did. So the first play I ever saw was directed by a dear friend of mine, but I wasn't going to become friends with him for, 35 years.
Say for years.
That's a theater. Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
It's a small world we live in. And, our community is relatively small as global communities go. But boy, it's monumentally apparent to me that as we move through our lives, and you and I have had longstanding, careers, 40 plus year careers, that those people are going to be in and out of your life for the rest of your life, for the rest of at least your professional life. I have questions from go. Submitted questions on our social media for you. I have a few for you. This one seems to have come up 3 or 4 times. How does Disney Theatrical Group determine which movie gets to be a stage show? Why are some and why not some, specifically Tangled? What determines whether or not an animated feature comes to the stage? That's really the question.
Well, we adapt. Sometimes we do totally original plays, like Peter and the Starcatcher, which was, won 5 Tonys, and it's produced all over the country. It's like right up there with Our Town, actually, for how many amateur productions get done of it. And sometimes we take old material and reinvent it, like Mary Poppins. And sometimes we do things like, say, a Frozen or a Lion King or Beauty and the Beast that are fresh off the thing. And I'd love to give you a scientific answer, but I'm in charge and I pick it.
Oh, okay, that works for me. I understand that, actually.
And sometimes nobody wants to do it. Like when I said, I saw a rough cut of Frozen, and I called my friend John Lasseter, who was running animation then, and I called him. I screened it at midnight in the Disney screening room in New York on Park Avenue, and I said, "This is a stage musical," and the brilliant song score by Bobby Lopez and Kristen Anderson Lopez, who are amazing writers, and that script by Jennifer Lee, who I literally was on the phone with yesterday, doing revisions for the German production of Frozen. You never stop writing these things. I took Ann Court and I, my associate producer, Ann and I took almost 15 minutes out of Lion King on its 10th anniversary. It was too long. Yeah, too long. Got to cut it. But I saw Frozen and said, "Oh, this should be one," and that was really fast.
I remember it happened.
Lion King is the one I didn't want to do.
Really?
Michael Eisner said, "Let's do Lion King." And I said, "It's a terrible idea." He was chairman of Disney at the time. I said, "It's a terrible idea," because they just done Beauty and the Beast, and which was the original Beauty, was a very literal telling of the film, not the way we're doing it right now, which I'll come back to.
We keep saying back to Beauty and the Beast.
Well, that's your problem. But Michael kept saying he wanted to do Lion King. I said, "It's the worst idea ever," and we had this big fight about it. And he and I actually today, we had a fight right before we all went into quarantine. But we were in Michael's restaurant in New York fighting about the story of how we were fighting, and we disagreed on even the fight. But anyway, he said, just do it. And I said, well, I don't know if you're gonna like what I would do with it. He goes, just do it. And I literally went back to my office and I flipped through my Rolodex. And we of our age know that those Rolodexes with all those little notes in pencil mean something. You know, Gordon's Rolodex was great, Gordon Davidson's Rolodex, but you know, the notes meant as much as what was written there, typed. And I called Julie Taymor at home, hadn't spoken with her in literally a decade. And I said, hi, it's Tom Schumacher. He goes, oh, hi, Tom. Literally, it had been a decade. And I tried to bring her to the LA festival, the one when Cirque du Soleil and Mahabharata came. Didn't work. So 10 years later, I call her and I say, we're thinking of putting this thing called The Lion King on stage. It was the biggest movie of all time in that moment. And she said, what's The Lion King? and I sent her a bunch of stuff, videos and things, and we began working on it. So that one, Peter and I had this idea of how we could do it. But since then, it just has to tick a box with me. Well, the one thing, I had this rule, I won't do it if I don't see how. Now, sometimes I blow it. I've blown it twice, but twice out of 10 or 12 isn't so bad. But I have to see it in my head. I have to have a vision for it. Otherwise, I can't I can't do this for hire. You have to give so much of your soul and to bring these glorious people on who are going to create the show. And so like Aladdin, for example, which has become this big hit, and it's a big hit in New York, and it's playing all over the world. And we have a new version of Aladdin that we're prepping right now, that will be able to kind of faster moving. And I'm doing a production in Mexico with the Genie reinvented, a very specifically Mexican angle instead of doing the Cab Calloway thing we do on Broadway. And it's really fun. And I love taking these shows around the world. But Aladdin, I couldn't see in my head. I couldn't see it. And we had a one act version, but an hour long that like youth theaters would do, and some theaters would do it like a Christmas, like almost like a panto. And people kept saying, do you have a 2-act version? And so to feed the licensing market, we developed a 2-act version. And I shared it with the great Alan Menken, the composer of Beauty and the Beast and Pocahontas and Aladdin and on and on and on. And he said, well, I love this writer, Chad Beglin, but I think the way you're telling the story, it's the wrong angle. So I don't like it. And I said, well, yeah, I'll just get someone else. It's just for kids and stuff. And he said, no, I want to write this. He said, so send Chad. So I sent Chad Beglin up on a train, and then they got picked up and driven to Alan Menken's house in upstate New York. And they spent the day pulling out the files that Alan and the late Howard Ashman, the great lyricist and storyteller, that had created Beauty and Aladdin and Mermaid and everything. And they pulled all the old files out, and out of that grew the elements that became Aladdin as we know it. And we were doing a reading in New York with all professional actors going through it. And in the middle of the second act, we're in the middle of a big number called High Adventure that was written originally for the movie, that got cut from the movie. And it's so theatrical. And my longtime dear friend, who I was literally on the phone with today, Chris Montan, who's worked on every musical, every film, everything, every short, everything I've ever done since coming to Disney. He was he's my partner and my music producer, and a great advisor. And Chris leaned to me in the middle of the song High Adventure and said, why isn't this on Broadway? And the penny dropped. And then I figured, and then I started to see it in my head. And then I met Casey Nicholaw, who became the director and choreographer. And the idea was to take it from an action adventure movie with music and make it a classic musical. And Casey, and then we began to see it. And then I had an idea for the carpet, which has got a lot of attention, this magic carpet. It's a great illusion. I'm a magic geek from my childhood. I had an idea of a technique, and I went to Jim Steinmeier, who had taught me this technique, but never for something that big. Yeah, Jim Steinmeier is a legend. He, and he did Beauty for Us and everything, and Poppins. And everyone said, well, the thing that will never work is the genie and the carpet. And the two things that everyone talked about were the genie and the carpet. James Monroe Iglehart played the genie, which is how it was originally conceived. Fats Waller meets Cab Calloway, as opposed to the blue version of Robin Williams. and the carpet. And then I just began to see it as the Genie Follies. And the more we could get the Genie at the center of it. So it became this evolution, working with Casey, which is one of the happiest experiences of my life, and became a hit. But it's because I could see it. It doesn't mean you know how it's going to end up, but I could see it. And you know, the other hero of that one, of Aladdin, besides Casey and James Miraglehart and Jim Steinmeier and Chris Montan, and of course Alan Menken and Chet Baglin, all these people, Bob Crowley did that beautiful set, and of course my beloved Natasha Katz, lighting designer. But Emmanuel Eisenberg, who's an American theatrical legend, and probably most famous for, in the commercial world because he had this giant string of hits with Neil Simon, but did all these plays with Tom Stoppard, and, you know, worked for David Merrick, for pity's sake. And at one point in time, he had 7 plays running simultaneously on Broadway that he was the lead producer of. Manny came to see Aladdin in its out-of-town triad in Toronto. And I'd asked him to come, and he walked up to me after the show, and I was terrified because it really wasn't working. And he said, "You know, I love you." And he said, "I think you have a hit, but the first 30 minutes really suck. Want to get a drink?" And we spent much of the night talking through it.
He was really like the consigliere, and is for so many of us. He's the only person except for Peter Zeisler, who was, you know, one of the founders of the Guthrie Theater and Theater Communications Group, which Tom knew well. The only 2 people that when they call me, I'd answer the phone, "Hello, God." Manny loves that. He loves that.
Yeah.
Hello.
Peter Zeisler, I'm the only person you know who's ever said this to you. I took a bath with Peter Zeisler once.
Yeah, you are the only person who's ever said that to me. Explain yourself.
Peter Zeisler and I, and Sarah O'Connor, who was then at Milwaukee Rep, and Donovan Marley, who was then at Denver Center. Oh gosh, a bunch of really great people. We were on a cultural exchange in Japan, hosted by the Japan Fund. We were 3 weeks traveling around Japan seeing theater. So there we were hosted by the Japan Foundation for 3 weeks to see theater in Japan. And on the first day, they gave us instructions on how to take a bath in the hotel. And I end up in a giant bathtub in exactly what you would wear bathing. And that's when I became friends with Robert Falls of the Goodman Theater, and Peter Zeisler.
Falls is enough of a gigantic human being to share a bathtub with.
He hates it when I tell this story. So every time we did a show together, we did a beautiful, fun version of Jungle Book at the Goodman Theater.
Yeah, I love it.
And I did all these press events, and I'd always say Bob Falls and I met in the bathtub in Japan. He hated it. Bob Falls is so tall. How tall is he? He's so tall that he and I had to share a room in this ryokan, an ancient, an old Japanese inn from the 1700s, and we slept on the floor on tatami mats, and the floor was tatami, and then they put your futon on it. They didn't have a futon big enough, and they had to make a futon for him so that he could sleep through the night.
He's an enormous human being.
Yeah, well, yes, matched by his heart and brains. Yeah.
The Beast. Would you talk to me about Beauty and the Beast? We keep saying we're going to get back to that.
Oh, it's fun. We're doing a revival. It's mostly a revival, but the entire team that created the first production has come back together, and we're doing an all-new production that's going to begin in the UK next spring. I just love it. I had a glorious hour and a half today with the team, looking at all new designs, new everything. Ann Hould-Ward, who won a Tony Award for the costumes, so she's redesigning it. It's just joyful. I mean, we've all known each other for a long time. We've all been through a lot together. And it's beautiful and it's fun. And Linda Wolverton, who I've known forever, who wrote the movie and of course wrote the stage show, has now gone through it and made interesting edits. You know, would you use that word choice today? Would you say it that way? What could make this snappier? What might give this character more dimension? It's fun to go back into stuff. Ethel Merman had this phrase when she opened, the show was frozen, right? And she'd say, "Call me Miss Birdseye, this show is frozen," because Birdseye invented the frozen vegetable. And she would say, "Call me Miss Birdseye, this show is frozen." I'm completely the opposite. We reinvent. We're reinventing Aladdin right now too. We're reinventing how it can tour lighter and for around the world, and it's fun to get back into it. I love the development of shows, so.
Yeah. I mean, you're particularly comfortable and love to be immersed in that process,
And coming up with gags, and like I was on with Jennifer Lee yesterday because there's a song, I won't address it here because we haven't announced what we're doing, but there's a song in Frozen that in Germany doesn't make any sense. Literally just like, what? Because culturally it doesn't make any sense. And we are, so we have an idea about how to completely reinvent it. And so I sent her a kind of outline of the pages and I love that. I just love it. Love it. How can that be reinvented? How can we change that? How can we make that better? You get to fix things,
Well,
you get
what
to
I
work.
find inspiring about watching you work, and God knows we've watched each other work for many, many years, dare I say decades, but you are easily not just excited by, but completely taken in with the idea of a good story and what one can do with it, and how once you've done it, how you can go back and look at it and adjust it. I mean, because your stories, your Disney stories, last for decades and generations.
Yeah,
and
if you get them right. But also, I've also done it when we've gotten it wrong.
I was about to that up.
Yeah.
So you said you got it twice.
Yeah, Little Mermaid ran a year and a bit, year and a half. Tarzan ran a year, which for most people is not a flop, but for us, their initial runs were flops. I've never done a show that didn't go into profit, but sometimes it takes me a few years to do that. With Tarzan, I had this big idea that it be intimate. We had created it in a more circus kind of way. And having made the movie with Phil Collins and knowing what the germ of that movie is, one world, two families, this relationship between a boy and his adoptive mother. And I thought if we scaled it way down and made it very intimate, we did it at the Richard Rodgers Theater, totally my fault. I loved what everyone was creating, and Phil Collins wrote the most glorious new music for it that went along with the big hit songs, from the feature film. But in so doing, I think it felt to some people silly. And I did it with my dear friend Joop van den Ende of Stage Entertainment, and we expanded the show and made it huge, with flying over the auditorium and lots of stuff happening. And in so doing, revealed the story in a way that wasn't so precious. And it ran 10 years in Germany.
It ran 10 years? Wow.
10 years in Germany.
Wow.
And huge thing. And that was great. And the other one we reworked is Little Mermaid. These will all be chapters in my book because it's what you learn when you get it wrong. Mm-hmm. And it's not that, it's my responsibility. I chose all the people, but, and they're still lovely people that I'm friends with and would work with again, but we just didn't do it right. Or there were crucial points where we made a mistake that you couldn't get out of.
Yeah. That's what I find that the most, I find that that's where it repeats itself for me occasionally is the circumstances are always different, but you do get into these moments where you make a choice, you have to go with that choice and you can't reverse it.
Yeah. I had an executive coach once, someone that, helped me think through some stuff. And I've I love him, and I've gone back to him a number of times with like problems, or sent people to see him, because he helps you sort of your executive thinking. How do you think through that? How do you listen to someone else and react to them? I find it a remarkably valuable experience. But he said something to me that occasionally, I'll tell it here, that I talk about, which is, he said, when you have a career, mine is one of them, many people have the careers like this, where you have been involved with things that were remarkably successful, that nobody wanted, that everyone said were a bad idea, and then they turn out to be sensational ideas, that you start to think that the naysayers have no value. And you begin to ignore people. And he said, you must always hold on to the fact that you should examine that someday the naysayers may be right. Now, Walt Disney, you know, with whom I share a birthday, by the way, Walt Disney, I'm told by Richard Sherman, was worried about Mary Poppins because it was the film, because it was the very first time he made something that everyone thought was a good idea. Every time he'd say, I'm taking Pamela Travers' books of Mary Poppins and I'm making a movie, that's a great idea. It made him worry, actually, at times, because everything else he had done that was a hit, people had hated the idea. And when I saw Cirque du Soleil the first time, it was the winter spring of 1986. And I had been flown to Canada by a brilliant man named Michel Robitaille, cultural attaché of the Quebec delegation in Los Angeles. We had met on the Olympics in '84. At this time, I was programming with Robert J. Fitzpatrick, the great Bob Fitzpatrick. I was programming this 1987 Los Angeles festival. Many people conflate the Olympic festival and the 1987 festival, and they often think things that they saw in '87 were in '84. But '87 was most famous for the Mahabharata, the 9-hour epic play by Peter Brook, and the American debut and first appearance outside of Canada of Cirque du Soleil. Well, I went up in the spring of '86 to see Cirque du Soleil in a parking lot in Quebec City. I was picked up at the airport by the founder of it, Guy Laliberté, who drove me in a beat-up white station wagon to the site. And over the course of that weekend, I was in my 20s. I fell in love with it and said, we should do this. I called Bob Fitzpatrick. He was in Sardinia, and I was going to bed, and he was getting up in the morning, and he was going to go to a press conference and talk about the festival. And I described what I'd seen. He got it in one, as the Brits say, and he said, I'm going to announce it as our opening night of the festival. Get a deal. And it took a year and some change to actually get a deal and get the thing up. And it was the most panicked I've ever been about anything in my whole life, trying to get Cirque du Soleil to America. But other than Bob Fitzpatrick, every single person I told about it said it was a terrible idea. Nobody wants to see a circus. Who wants to see a circus without animals? What, you know, nobody got the idea. And Labor Day weekend, Friday night, 1987, everybody in Los Angeles, including your pal Kirk Douglas, were there that night to see Cirque du Soleil, because it was the opening night. We said, it's not gonna be a black tie opening, it's a black t-shirt opening. And I have news footage, me and Steve Kometko, all these people, me being interviewed. I'm 29 years old.
I so remember that, oh my God.
And I'm 29 years old, and I took this gamble, and every single person said nobody wanted to see it. Well, Cirque du Soleil became a giant hit. So the whole run of the festival sold out. It became a thing, and it became Cirque du Soleil as you know it. And I learned, just because people tell you it's a bad idea doesn't mean it's a bad idea. And that's one. Two, when I went, I was recruited to go to Disney, and I produced a movie called The Rescuers Down Under, which is a beautiful movie, and I learned so much.
Yeah,
I learned so much making movies, but it didn't work. It wasn't economically successful in its moment. And Jeffrey Katzenberg, the brilliant studio chief and Hollywood, mega lord, was running Disney Studios, and he gave me another project after that called King of the Beasts. And I I shared it with my my husband Matthew, what it was going to be, and he said, "Do they sing?" It's the story of lions, and I said, "No, they don't sing. It's like a National Geographic special, but animated." And he said, "Why don't they sing?" And I said, "Because it's not a musical. They're making musicals someplace else." He said, "They should sing." And I went back to the studio on a Monday. We were working on a house up in Bungalow Heaven in Pasadena at the time, and at the studio on Monday. And I said, "How about if they sing?" And everyone said, "Terrible idea. No, don't sing." And it took me a year to get from that point to get Elton John. Many people said no, including Elton John, Benny Anderson and Bjorn Ulvaeus, Paul McCartney. Elton John said no 3 times. Finally got Elton John. He wrote some songs. Nobody wanted to work on the movie. No one wanted to be part of it. One director left the movie because he didn't want to be part of a musical version of it. And everyone wanted to work on Pocahontas, which I was also responsible for, and nobody wanted to work on Lion King. And of course, the film becomes a sudden hit, but not when people are expecting it. The film, no one thought it was going to work, and then it became a hit. And then the same thing happened when it went to the stage. Nobody thought it would be a hit. No one wanted to be part of it. And
well, I mean, the first time you said to people, so puppets, Julie Taymor, if you Google Julie Taymor, you see what Julie Taymor does for a living. And I think a lot of people couldn't wrap their heads around what that was. And I'll never forget seeing it the first time I saw it on Broadway, sitting next to Diane Keaton, because you gave me house seats and I was sitting next to Diane Keaton. And she was like clapping like a seal as those animals marched out. And then she couldn't stop weeping. I mean, people were just undone. But
that's my point about people don't know. This is that naysayer thing. And then the third one I will tell you is Toy Story. I was the Disney executive in charge of, there's a large beast there. I was, John Lasseter and we did his first 5 movies together, and Disney bought this idea, which was nothing in the original pitch is actually the movie as you know it. But when we would tell people it was going to be a CG feature, they would say, nobody wants to see that. And there's famous quotes by important people in the LA Times saying, nobody will ever watch a computer animated feature. The first preview got terrible scores, and it reinvented film business. It reinvented Disney animation. It reinvented everything. Pixar is a transformative thing. And so to have been there for the beginning of Cirque du Soleil, been there for the beginning, and I've worked on all 3 versions of Lion King, the first movie, stage show, and I executive produced the last movie. Only 2 people have done that, me and Lebo M.
Really?
The only 2 people who've done all 3. Yeah. Anyway, Lebo wrote all the beautiful choral music and in the film, and then he wrote songs beautiful songs in the stage show. And on this film, his signature, because he's that's him. And those things, each one, Cirque du Soleil, Lion King and all its versions, and Toy Story were thought to be disastrous ideas and turn out to be really important ideas and really good ideas. So then you say, I shouldn't listen to people when they tell me things won't work. On the other hand, sometimes when they're saying, Tommy, that's not going to work, you really should listen to them.
Especially when they call you Tommy.
Well, if they call me Tommy, they've known me for a long time.
All right, I have one more question from our social media. Well, maybe 2. One's pretty easily answered. Muppets, Muppets, Muppets. Why haven't the Muppets ever come to Broadway?
I love this question because I'm going to tell you the truth.
Okay.
I have wanted to do the Muppets forever. And in fact, we did a full 20-minute workshop test to see how the Muppets would play on stage. I staged it at the New Amsterdam Theater. I had the entire cast of characters there. I had a local 1 guy, local 1 crew guy backstage rubbing his eye. And I said, oh, did you get hurt? And he said, no, I was just talking to Gonzo. And I realized, giant idea.
That was a stagehand.
Yeah, Piggy was in it. They were all in it. I proved to myself that we could do it. And we were going to go do a pilot production. Our idea was to do the Muppet Show live. It's time to put on makeup. It's time to light the lights. It's time to get things started. It's the Muppet Show tonight, right? We were going to do with the opening number and do classic skits and songs, as well as some new material. All the people we were ready to go. And it was going to be a big test. And then we're going to go out of town and then do like a 6-week run at a theater that I'm not going to tell you where, but just to see would it work, because it's scale, and I refuse to do it if there's TV cameras involved. I wanted to do it where you're actually looking at the puppets. And one of the parts of the test was Kermit's head is little, but you can't make Kermit bigger because his mouth has to go, you need to be able to do that thing. If you make him bigger, it won't do that. But his head's about the same size as Michael Banks in Mary Poppins, and you can see him from the theater. So we were really being clinical about this. Anyway, we all loved it. The audience that we invited in, a couple hundred people, were all crying. It really was played great. And then Disney committed to a Muppet TV show that tanked. And it meant the entire inventory of puppets had to go do the TV show. And then I couldn't do it because it's millions of dollars to build all those puppets for a trial production. And every time we've had a window where we could go do it, someone else wants to go do some film thing with it. So it's just been a terrible alignment of time, and nobody besides me and my team thinks this is a great idea. And I think it's a sensational idea.
Yeah, well, I would tell you that my marketing director agrees with you, because that was the question she threw in. All right, one more question and then we're done. Because we have a youth theater program, as you know, and we have a conservatory, and we have classes at every level, and it's a major part of our mission that we train the next generation of artists and people who, you know, the young people who will go to the theater, and we have a lot of programs for that. So someone asked, what initial sparks of interest happened to you way back in your life that ignited the passions you most certainly have? So many have stories of that teacher from 3rd grade, or those books your parents read to you. What was the impetus for you to get into the theater? Or who really inspired?
Well, I probably always had an interest in it. I was a theatrical child and a performative child, and I have distinct memories of doing every possible school play. I remember in 1968 in the 4th grade, I'd produced and was starring in a production of The Pied Piper of Hamelin in my 4th grade class, Valley View Elementary School in La Crescenta, California.
I know that.
I was literally up that morning to get ready. And that was the morning we all found out that Bobby Kennedy had been shot. I was 10 years old and the show had to go on. I have that distinct memory. And then when I moved really soon after that, months after that, to the San Francisco Bay Area and grew up there, the arts were so big. You know, it was the 60s, and there was so much funding, and the 60s going into the 70s was great for that. And I started doing school productions, but I really, really fell into a community theater, a youth theater at a recreation center, and a community theater. And those people, my family of that theater. And so I did a little bit of theater at school. I ran a lunchtime theater program called Theater to Munch By. And I sometimes starred in them, I sometimes directed them. But in the school's little theater, I much preferred to hijack stuff than to just do what the drama teacher wanted to do, because he wasn't my style. And the community theater meant you got to play your own age. And then because the man who ran that allowed me to start directing, at 16, I was directing for the city of San Mateo, a thing called the Beresford Good Time Players. And I was directing plays in the afternoon with 10 to 15-year-olds. And I was 16, 17 at the time. And then, but I was very mature. And then at night, I was doing community theater plays, which I would either direct, or I would co-direct, or I would act in, or I would serve as a producer. And in the middle between those two things every day, I was the janitor of the Dance Arts Center in Foster City, California. And I could take all the dance classes I wanted, as long as every morning the garbage cans were empty, the floors were clean, and the mirrors were clean. So I was the custodian there, and I get to pay for my classes. And those people who ran, Burl Davis, who ran the studio, the man who ran the community theater, saved my life. They created a world for me where I could achieve, I could be measured, I could measure myself, and I had a family. And although I came from a, you know, loving family, like a typical family back in those days, but my true family were the people in the theater, and I've never felt more comfortable than in a theater. But people stepped up to me, and it's why I wrote, you know, I wrote this book. It's now got its, you know, third edition is out now, called How Does the Show Go On? And it's a book about theater for kids to see what people in the theater actually do. And this book has embedded movies in it. You can hold your phone over it and it'll play the movies, and you can see people doing their job, and we interview people and we profile it. Because for me, bringing kids in, and every year I go to the Junior Theater Festival. I just was at the Junior Theater Festival in Atlanta, Georgia, Martin Luther King weekend this year. I spoke to 6,500 children. It's my favorite thing. If you can light that fire, it's not that they need to be professionals like we are.
No.
But to light that fire, that you can be part of something, learning, you know, coping mechanisms, learning how to cooperate, learning how to collaborate, learning to walk a mile in another man's shoes. Literally, you have to wear someone else's shoes, to play other people. You know, we learn the world by doing this.
Yeah, those are life skills. And I think that for me in our youth theater program at Laguna Playhouse, that is so apparent. And having watched 10 years of kids graduate from, you know, those classes and the conservatory program, and having done plays, you know, they've become the most extraordinary young people with skills that they would have only gotten under those circumstances. So
I love it.
That is fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. I'm happy we got to spend part of the day together.
Yeah, I have to
The sun has gone down here. I'm in the Berkshires in upstate New York, right on the border of New York and Massachusetts. So, you know, it's coming up on 8:30 here, which means it's still light outside, but we had a very rainy day, so it's kind of cloudy, and it's really making my glasses pop, which I like.
It's good. I like it. You got to keep those glasses. And the hair, I'm liking the hair.
Well, it's Corona hair, you know,
I like it.
No, it's very hard to keep. It's hard to keep a hairpiece together in this weather.
It's very Beethoven of you. I'm kind of digging the Beethoven look on you.
Well, it's yeah. There's a lot of product, you know, and everyone's figured out some way to manage their hair, and even you,
including me. Yeah, I only spray the best of them.
Yeah, I was at a Lincoln. I'm on the board of Lincoln Center in New York, and this brilliant woman, an extraordinary supporter of the arts, and just a great woman named Adrienne Arsht. And we were not that far into the pandemic, and she said on a Zoom call with the entire. We were talking to each other in this giant room of Zoom call, 4 pages, and she said, "Tom, I'm going to tell you, if this goes on much longer, the word blonde is going to disappear from the vocabulary."
She's absolutely right. Yeah. As witnessed by, totally. Yeah. Well, tell Matt and Alden that I thank them for giving you up for an hour and a half. And
I'm sure they're trying to figure out why I'm not at dinner yet. So I'm going to go now. It's been great doing this.
Noise. My dog had to get in on the act. My daughter had to get in on the act, but thank you.
It's all big.
You know what?
Bye, lovey. Bye.
Bye. Talk to you soon.